What you are seeing right now is not happening right now. Think about it. At this very moment, the light hits your retina. That signal travels through the optic nerve. It reaches the visual cortex at the back of your skull. It is processed, compared with memories. It integrates with sound, touch, and the temperature of the room. All of that process takes time. 80 milliseconds. It doesn't sound like much, but it's enough for everything you call the present to actually be the past. You have been living 80 milliseconds late your entire life. And worse yet, your brain knows it. And instead of warning you, it decided to fabricate a solution. That solution is your reality. Who is making the decisions? Settle in. Subscribe. This one goes all the way to the edge. Your present is the past of your brain. Let's start with something concrete. You are reading this, or listening to me. At this moment, photons are hitting your retina. Those photons travel converted into electrical signals through about 1 million fibers of the optic nerve. One processes where the objects are, the other processes what they are. Then that information integrates in association areas. It combines with the sound you are hearing. It syncs with the weight sensation of your body in the chair. It filters through the amygdala, which evaluates if something in the environment represents a threat. By the time all that integration happens, 80 milliseconds have passed. 80. To give you scale, a human blink lasts between 150 to 400 milliseconds. This means your brain processes reality faster than you can blink. That sounds impressive, but here's the problem. The world didn't wait those 80 milliseconds. The world kept moving, and your brain needs to present you a coherent, synchronized, fluid reality. A reality that feels continuous, that feels present, that feels real. Then it does something extraordinary. In 1999, neuroscientist David Eagleman, who has spent decades studying time and perception, published research describing something he called post-diction. Not prediction, post-diction. Your brain doesn't just predict what's going to happen. It actively rewrites what just happened to make sense. There's a classic experiment that demonstrates this. It's called the flash lag effect. If you see a moving object and at a precise point in its trajectory a flash of light appears, your brain places the flash in a different location than where it actually occurred. It places it further back in the trajectory. Because your brain, when processing the flash, already knows where the object was going and retroactively adjusts the position of the flash to make sense of it all. You are not seeing the present. You are seeing the best reconstruction of a very recent past that your brain could assemble in record time. And you do this every second of every minute of every day of your life. The question that naturally arises is, if the brain is constantly compensating, adjusting, reconstructing, what is actually happening? And what if we actually saw reality as it is? How far can that compensation go? What else is it fabricating that you don't know it's fabricating? The answer begins with something you probably assume you see correctly. The color. You do not react to reality. You react to the prediction of reality. In 2005, a neuroscientist named Carl Friston published a paper that silently changed the way neuroscience understands the brain. It wasn't front-page news. It didn't make it to television. But in the 15 years that followed, it became one of the most cited theoretical frameworks in all of cognitive neuroscience. The idea is called predictive coding, and it says something radical. Your brain is not processing reality. Your brain is constantly generating a prediction of what reality should be, and then comparing that prediction with the signals that reach your senses. It only actively processes the difference, what researchers call prediction error. Think of it this way. If you walk down a hallway you know by heart, your brain is not processing every wall, every floor, every door. He already knows what there is. He is just actively monitoring. Is there something different from what he predicted? Is there a box that wasn't there before? An open door that is usually closed? 90% of the fibers in your optic nerve go from your eye to your brain. The remaining 10% goes from your brain back to your eyes. That 10% are the predictions your brain sends down, literally telling your eyes what to expect to see. Your brain is not a passive receptor of reality. It is an active generator of predictions that reality barely has a chance to correct. There is a direct consequence of this that you can verify right now. Have you ever been in a silent room and suddenly heard the name someone was about to say before they said it? Or did you complete someone's sentence before they finished? Or did you drive home and not remember doing so because your brain had completely automated the journey? Those are not mistakes. Those are your predictive brain working exactly as designed. The problem, and it's a huge problem, is that predictions can be wrong. In 2015, the internet exploded over a dress. A simple dress, photographed under artificial light, whose image went viral because half of the people seeing it perceived it as blue and black, and the other half saw it as white and gold. It was the same dress, the same image, the same photons on the same screen. The difference was what each person's brain predicted about the source of light in the scene. If your brain assumed the photo was taken in daylight, bluish light, it compensated towards warm tones, and you saw the dress as white and gold. If your brain assumed artificial light, yellowish light, it compensated towards cool tones, and you saw blue and black. There was no correct perception. There were two distinct predictive models applied to the same raw data. What that means is profound and a bit disturbing. Two people can look at exactly the same thing and genuinely see different things. Neither is wrong, and neither is seeing objective reality. They are seeing predictions. And if the brain can be so deeply mistaken about something as simple as the color of a dress, how often does it make mistakes about more complex things? About people? About threats? About memories? The world has no colors. Your brain invents them. Pause for a moment. Look at something red. A cup, a wire, a brake light, whatever you have in sight. That red does not exist in the object. The object simply reflects photons with a wavelength of approximately 700 nanometers. Those photons have no color. The color red occurs completely inside your head. There are people with 4 types of cones instead of 3. They are called tetrachromats. See colors that you literally cannot imagine because you don't have the hardware to perceive them. Colors that have no name in any language because no one else sees them. How many colors of the world are you missing? And color is just the beginning. Shape is not what it seems either. Your eye has a blind spot, a hole in your visual field that has always been there. Why don't you see it? Because your brain fills it in. Take the information from the edges of the blind spot and paint that area with what it predicts. If there is a smooth wall, paint a smooth wall. If there is a pattern, extend the pattern. There is a hole in your vision right now, and your brain is lying so efficiently that you don't notice it. Close your right eye. Extend your left arm with your thumb up. Stare straight ahead with your left eye. Slowly move your thumb to the right. At some point, around 15 degrees from the center, your thumb disappears. It does not move behind anything. It is not hidden. It simply ceases to exist in your visual field because it entered the blind spot. And now comes the uncomfortable part. If your brain fills in the blind spot without you knowing, what else is it filling in? In what other places in your perception is it interpolating, extrapolating, inventing, and presenting the result as if it were raw reality? The answer is everywhere. Your peripheral field of vision is almost completely fabricated. Your eyes only have real resolution in a small area called the fovea. The interpretation of our vision is more complex than we think. And so, your brain presents you reality, inflated and modified. Everything else you see on the sides is a low-resolution reconstruction that your brain fills in with predictions based on movement and context. You constantly move your eyes, in quick movements called saccades, to scan the scene and update the model. During those movements, your brain literally blinds you. It turns off visual processing so you don't see the blurry sweep. And then, when the eyes stop, it presents the complete image as if there had never been an interruption. You are literally blind several times a second, and you don't know it because your brain hides it from you. Your brain has already built a complete universe without any external signals. You call it dreaming. We have talked about how your brain fabricates reality when there are data to process. But there is a more powerful proof that the reality you perceive is a construction. Every night, when you enter REM sleep, your brain builds a complete universe with texture, depth, sound, temperature, people with coherent personalities, narratives that make internal sense, without any external signal. No photons, no sound waves. The line between reality and dream becomes blurred, but there is always a part of you that reflects on this distance. You remember every detail, every color, every emotion. And with that feeling, you return to reality, where a new day begins. No real sensory input, just your brain, generating a reality from nothing. And while you are in that fabricated universe, it is completely real. You have no suspicion that you are dreaming. The emotions are genuine. Fear is real. Joy is real. Pain is real. The love you feel in a dream activates exactly the same neural circuits as the love you feel awake. In 2004, neuroscientist Rodolfo Linares published a book called Eye of the Vortex, where he proposed something many of his colleagues found uncomfortable: that the perception of reality during wakefulness is fundamentally the same process as dreaming. The only difference is that during wakefulness, external sensory signals modulate the dream, but the generative mechanism is the same. The reality you experience awake is a dream modulated by the senses. You are not a receiver of reality. You are a generator of realities that uses the senses as partial correction. Think about what that implies. The next time you are in a difficult conversation and read the other person's attitude, the intention behind their words, what they were clearly thinking, remember that you are projecting onto reality, not reading it. The end. Your brain constructed a model of that person based on past experiences, present fears, and active expectations, and is presenting that model to you as if it were direct perception. It rarely is. But all this, the 80 milliseconds delay, the predictions, the manufactured colors, the blind spot, the dreams, all this is just preparation for the experiment that forever changed the conversation about free will. An experiment conducted in 1983 by a physiologist named Benjamin Libet. And what he discovered is, depending on how you look at it, either completely reassuring or one of the most disturbing findings in the history of neuroscience. Your brain decided before you knew you were going to decide. Benjamin Libet was a physiologist at the University of California, San Francisco. He had been studying something that philosophy had debated for centuries, but that science was just beginning to measure: the exact moment a decision occurs. The problem was technical. How do you measure when someone decides to do something? His solution was equally elegant and disturbing. He connected his participants to an electroencephalogram, a device that measures the electrical activity of the brain. He asked them to look at a special clock with a light point that spun like a very fast second hand. The instruction was simple: move your wrist whenever you want, only when you want to, spontaneously, without following any rhythm. And when you do, note down the position of the light point at the moment you felt the intention to move. Not when you moved your wrist, when you felt the intention. What Libet found left him, in his own words, genuinely surprised. The brain showed a specific electrical signature before the movement. This signature is called readiness potential, and neuroscientists had known about it since the 60s. What no one expected was the timing. The readiness potential, the brain activity that precedes movement, began on average 550 milliseconds before the physical movement. The conscious feeling of intention, the moment participants said they decided to move, occurred on average 200 milliseconds before the movement. The difference, 350 milliseconds. Your brain started preparing the movement 350 milliseconds before you knew you were going to move. 350 milliseconds in which your brain had already made the decision and you still didn't know it. Consciousness was not initiating the action. Consciousness was being notified of an action that the brain had already initiated. When Libet published his results in 1983, the reaction of the philosophical and scientific community was something between disbelief and intellectual panic, because the implications were clear and no one wanted to articulate them. If the brain initiates actions before the conscious mind knows they are going to happen, then the feeling of "I decided to do this" could be, at best, a story you tell yourself after the fact. And in the worst case, a complete illusion. Libet was a careful man. He did not jump to conclusions. He proposed something he called conscious veto. Although consciousness does not initiate actions, it might be able to cancel them. Perhaps free will is not in initiating, but in inhibiting, in saying no. It was an elegant exit, and for 2 decades, it was the compromise position that many adopted. Then came the functional magnetic resonance imaging studies, and the exit closed. 10 seconds before you decide, the scanner already knows. In 2008, a team of researchers from the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, led by John Dylan Haynes, published a study in Nature Neuroscience. They used functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, to scan the brains of participants while they made a simple decision: to press a button with their left or right hand. Participants could decide freely. They could wait as long as they wanted, and they could see the scanner in real time. Haynes and his team trained an algorithm to read the activation patterns in 2 specific regions of the brain, and then they had it predict. Before the participant pressed the button, before the participant reported having felt the intention to press, the algorithm could predict with significantly higher accuracy than chance which hand the participant would use. How much in advance? Up to 10 seconds. 10 seconds before the conscious person decided which hand to use, the activation pattern in their prefrontal cortex was already encoding the decision. 10 seconds in which you didn't know you had decided. 10 seconds in which, if someone could have read your brain, they would have been able to tell you what you were going to choose before you knew it. Haynes was careful in his conclusions. The predictive accuracy was real, but not absolute. About 60% for a binary decision, where chance is 50%. It wasn't perfect telepathy, but it was enough to be statistically impossible to ignore. Subsequent studies refined the finding. In 2011, researchers found predictive patterns in the frontopolar cortex up to 7 seconds before conscious decision. In 2013, another team showed that activity in the orbitofrontal cortex could predict not only what the subject would choose, but also with what level of confidence they would make the decision before the subject reported having made it. What was emerging was a picture that many found hard to accept. Conscious deliberation, that process you feel as thinking about what to do, could be, in many cases, a post hoc narrative. A story that your conscious brain constructs to explain a decision that unconscious processes have already made. Not always. Not in every decision. The science here is nuanced and researchers are careful, but often enough that the question is inevitable. Who is making the decisions? The oldest question in philosophy now has fMRI data. The question of free will has been around for about 3,000 years. The Greeks debated it. The Stoics built an entire philosophy around it. Descartes linked it to the soul. Kant tried to rescue it with pure reason. Spinoza said it was an illusion from the start. For 3,000 years, it was a debate without data. Now there are data, and what they have produced is not a clean answer. It is a more complicated conversation and, in a way, more interesting than any clean answer could be. There are 3 main positions in modern neuroscience. The first is called hard determinism. It states that the experiments of Libet, Haynes, and dozens of others are evidence that free will, as we popularly conceive it, a conscious I that initiates actions from scratch, is an illusion. Decisions are the result of physical processes in the brain, which are the result of previous states, stemming back even before you were born. There is no point of insertion for an I that freely chooses outside of that chain. Proponents include Sam Harris, who published a book titled Free Will in 2012. The second position is called compatibilism. It's the position of most professional philosophers when surveyed. It says that free will and determinism are not incompatible. Daniel Dennett is its most well-known advocate. It says that Libet's experiments measure the moment of muscle movement, not the moment of deliberation. The deliberation that matters may have occurred hours or days earlier. The third position is the one that disturbs everyone the most, that the question is wrongly posed. Philosophical positions are complex and intertwine with each other. Philosophers' opinions provoke reactions from the audience. Are we really understanding the nature of will and determinism? The debate over free will continues in philosophical circles. The possibility of true free will remains an enigma, and with that, the nature of our will is put into doubt. Perhaps there is still room for new ideas about free will. The quest for understanding will continue. That free will is a philosophical category that does not map cleanly to anything in the brain. That asking whether free will exists is like asking if the winning team of the game really won. What the 3 fields have in common is this: the popular version of free will, the notion that there is a you is separate from your brain that controls it from somewhere, does not survive contact with 21st century neuroscience. But this is where the story becomes more interesting, because it turns out that believing or not believing in free will has measurable consequences on behavior. In 2008, Kathleen Voss and Jonathan Schooler published an experiment where they induced participants to read texts arguing that free will is an illusion, or neutral texts. Then they put them in situations where they could cheat anonymously and without consequences. Participants who had read that free will does not exist cheated significantly more. In follow-up studies, reduced belief in free will was associated with lower motivation, less persistence in the face of obstacles, and a diminished sense of personal responsibility. What this suggests is that free will, whether or not it is a scientifically accurate description of how the brain works, is a narrative that serves a function. A narrative without which, apparently, we behave worse. What do you do with that? Perhaps consciousness is not the pilot. Perhaps it is the narrator. In 1976, psychologist Michael Gazzaniga published the results of years of work with split-brain patients. What he discovered was remarkable. With the corpus callosum severed, the two hemispheres act as two independent brains. You can show information to the left hemisphere without the right hemisphere knowing, and vice versa. In one of his most famous experiments, he showed the word walk only to the right hemisphere. The patient stood up and began to walk. Then Gazzaniga asked him why he had stood up. The patient did not hesitate. He did not say, "I don't know." He instantly invented a reason. "I wanted to get a soda." The left hemisphere had no access to the actual instruction. But he also did not admit ignorance. He observed the behavior of the body and constructed a coherent narrative explanation in real time. Gazzaniga called this mechanism the interpreter, and he proposed that this mechanism is not a rarity among split-brain patients. It is what the left hemisphere does constantly, in all humans, all the time. Observe the behavior, which was initiated by unconscious processes, and builds a narrative that explains that behavior in terms of intentions. You are not the pilot of your behavior. You are the narrator of your behavior. The I that experiences making decisions, that reflects on its values. That feels like it chose the path of its life. That I could fundamentally be a storyteller. An extraordinarily sophisticated system that takes what the brain has already done and builds an authorship narrative that makes you the protagonist. In 2011, neuroscientist Antonio Damasio published Self Comes to Mind, where he argues that consciousness is not a separate entity that dwells in the brain. You do not have a consciousness. Your brain produces it continuously, and it can stop producing it, like in general anesthesia, certain forms of deep meditation, like in a coma, which leads to the strangest question of all. If consciousness is produced by the brain, and if the brain makes decisions before consciousness knows it, what exactly is being conscious? And of what? You didn't invent this. This invented you. We start with a chair, with 80 milliseconds, with the claim that what you call the present is actually the past. We have come a long way since then. We have seen that your brain does not receive reality, it predicts it. That color does not exist outside your head. That there's a hole in your vision that your brain fills with inventions. That every night you build a complete universe from nothing and inhabit it as if it were real. That your decisions have a signature in your prefrontal cortex up to 10 seconds before you know you made them. That the I that you think makes them could be a narrator, not an author. It's all in the data. And now the question I promised at the beginning. If the brain generates reality, and if the conscious I is produced by the brain, who is making the decisions? The honest answer from modern neuroscience is, we do not know for certain. But there is something we do know. The system that makes decisions, conscious, unconscious, is the result of everything you have experienced. All the values you have formed, all the fears you have survived, all the people you have loved and who have loved you. That system is, in the deepest possible sense, you. Not the you that you think controls from somewhere behind your eyes, but the complete you. The you that includes what you do not see of yourself. The you that includes the processes that happen in the darkness of your skull. 80 milliseconds of delay, 10 seconds of anticipation. A whole life of predictions so well calibrated that you confuse them with reality. Your brain is not deceiving you. And what you really are is this: the universe, organized in a form complex enough to wonder how it works.